Good morning. We will now call this January 10th work session, 2023 work session to order. And I'm going to start by reading our Who Are We statement. We are the Polk County Leadership Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where our stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, and supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. And with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Hyde.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, staff, and community members. First and foremost, Happy New Year to all of you. Hopefully you all had a restful and positive break, an opportunity to relax and rejuvenate, as many of us have. So I know that the last few days counting down to return to school, many of us get anxious. I know our teachers, the feedback that we received, and I'm going to bring up calendar briefly because we do have a calendar committee meeting later this week so we can finalize calendars for the upcoming 2 to 3 school years and bring those to you in January. I will say teachers were incredibly responsive and appreciative of having 2 planning days upon a return from winter break prior to students arriving, so that they could enjoy the totality of their break and not feel like they had to plan for student return prior to everybody returning at the same time. So that being said, this morning it's my pleasure. Unfortunately, this morning one of our community partners asked to reschedule, so this morning we are joined by the Florida Dance Theater, and at this time I'd like to introduce Mr. Jermaine Thornton. He's the executive director, and he'll be coming forward to talk about their partnership with Polk County Public Schools. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. All right, so I will start off by saying I am a dancer, so I'll move around a lot, so especially when I'm nervous. Meeting new people, awesome people. Good morning. Thank you again for having me. Grateful to be here to share a little bit about what Florida Dance Theater has done over the past 29, 30 years now, and this coming October. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Florida Dance Theater, but give me 1 second. Let me pull up the slide. There we go. All right, so as I said, Florida Dance Theater has been in operation for about 29 years now. In the fall, we'll be celebrating 30 years in operation. Initially, it started with Carol Irks, who is a former professional dancer with the Cincinnati Ballet. She's performed across the country, across the state, internationally as well. She also, along with her husband, moved to the city of Winter Haven, started Lakeland Ballet in 1993. And from that point in time, she wanted to add more value to the city, to the county, and basically created Polk County's first, and still today only, professional dance company and training academy. It is solely a nonprofit organization, both the professional company as well as the training academy. So I took over. I'm gonna be very relaxed, yes? So I get nervous, my leg starts to shake, everything happens. So I took over in July 1st of 2019, obviously, about 8 months before COVID happened. So you all can imagine the surprise of, instead of learning the business, going into survival mode. What can we do? How can we still reach not only the students that we currently have, but the students we hope to reach in the future? So we did a few different things. I'm going off script here, going with the flow. And please feel free, any questions you may have, just bombard me with them towards the end. We went from having about 85 students within our academy, strong, building as you can, to 10 students. And we were just like, oh my gosh, what do we do? How can we reach the students? How can we reach the community? We shifted all of our academy classes to Zoom. And we collaborated with Silver Moon Drive-In to host an outdoor screening of one of our contemporary ballets, which was a hip-hop jazz spin off of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So we hosted that, as well as Silver Moon also threw in there a triple feature with Singing in the Rain. So we had a silent auction. So everyone drove in and we all just sat down in their cars, physically distanced, and enjoyed an evening. You know, it was a great time for everyone. Everyone really enjoyed it. And so moving forward with that, what does that look like? That, for me, that was testing ground, training ground, still in that mode. How best can you add value with an organization that has been in existence for such a long time? You're the new person coming in, you have a staff of people that are looking to you. What ways can you really reach and empower and impact the community? So this past summer, obviously, you know, everyone has adjusted and shifted and pivoted for that length of time. It's taken quite some time. So our board of directors, we're going through revitalization efforts. You see, I can't speak. I've only had 2 sips of coffee. Revitalization efforts to diversify the way that we are impacting the community, diversifying the way that we're reaching not just students, but seniors. They're also a forgotten, I really wouldn't say forgotten, but we need to pull them back in because they're also a part of our community. They add such value. They're also a part of the building blocks that make us who we are. So it all starts with our professional company. They're amazing. We usually contract 8 to 10 professional dancers throughout the season for about 28 to 30 weeks. And they provide the lecture demonstrations. They provide the instructions for our academy students. They also are the ones who go out into the community and really showcase what ways we can do that. So over the course of the time, we were able to collaborate, even during COVID, collaborate with graduate students from Florida Polytechnic University on a project we called APEX. APEX was developed to basically build a bridge between science, technology, engineering, and math, and dance. So the graduate students built sensors that were attached to our dancers' bodies. Our dancers executed different styles of movement, and the sensors recorded the data. From that data, the students also created an algorithm that filtered in the data and created fractal images. So obviously, because COVID, we were unable to present this at a full scale for the community. So this past summer, we were able to condense it and apply it to our summer intensive program, where we had some students participate in that. We're also working with different health organizations, such as the Watson Clinic Foundation, on arts and medicine initiatives. What ways can we use the arts in medicine, not just for physical, but mental, emotional services? How can those ways also impact our community? This past, you see, I'm just going now, I'm getting nervous. We obviously have our training academy with our amazing students. This past, in addition to like our outreach, we were fortunate to work with students from Crystal Lake Elementary School. We have been working with them since February of 2020. So obviously 6 weeks before COVID, we were able to, start with this initiative. So we are providing them with free dance classes after school about 1 to 2 times per week when we first started. Obviously with scheduling changes, we had to make the adjustments. But during that time, again, free dance classes for them. We then brought that up another level. We had the students attend performances for free. And this past December, we took it up a notch again. You see, we're causing trouble. We took it up a notch again, and we were able to provide the students with their first professional dance experience. And they performed with us in our performance of Nutcracker. They had 2 performances. We were able to provide free tickets to each student. And they had their costumes, and I messed it up. Let's go back. There we go. As you can see, Nutcracker 2022. 15 students were able to participate in that. They were extremely nervous backstage. It was our first production ever. It was really exciting for them. And we just have a little clip of rehearsals. As you can see, they're a bit nervous when the camera comes out. They're a bit nervous when the camera comes out, when the lights are on. They're just backstage. For me, honestly, Nutcracker is one of my favorite times of the year. Christmas is my favorite time of the year. And I was backstage with all of them. They're like, I don't remember the choreography. I can't do this. And I said, look, you've been practicing. You just breathe. You just have fun. It's not even about anybody else out there. It's about you. All this hard work that you've put in. You've worked with Mr. Michael. You've worked with Mr. Stefan. It's all about you right now. Forget about everybody else. You know, and you just see like a switch go off. And they're just like, okay, and they run on stage and they just go to town. And so for me, I'm just backstage cracking up because it's just like, this is a different person. Like, where'd they come from? You know, and for me, that's one of the biggest things that it really gets me because I came from this. You know, I grew up out of this. And for me to be in a position where I can then turn around and say, okay, here's this opportunity, here's this opportunity, here's this opportunity. It makes me feel as though I'm a part of something greater than myself. And then I can turn around and empower someone else to do the same thing for the future. So I had a lot more to say. I am ready for your questions. Go for it.
Give them a moment to tag if they want to join in on the speakers list. So the first speaker we have is Ms. Fields.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. And the idea of having to pivot during the COVID fiasco is very real. And I would imagine you had a challenge not just with getting the students to come in person, but also with staffing. Because I understand a lot of folks left dance and went to another profession. So how did you guys bounce back from that? And what words of wisdom would you have for folks like Girls Inc. that's trying to find a dance instructor right now?
Wow. Oh, that's a very loaded question, Ms. Fields. Oof. Okay. So I would say that some of the things that we did, and please let me know if I've answered your question well. We, in addition to shifting, you know, on Zoom and everything else like that, COVID, everything was just really rough. And one of the things that I talk with our staff about is, what other skill set do you have beyond your dancing that you can then lean into to pull that creative side out so that you're diversifying the way that you're impacting someone? What way can you then take all the good stuff you have, all the good stuff you've been building over the years? What way can you step out of your normal routine? Is there a thread that you can pull to get to that next level? For us, it was rough. We had dancers who, we shifted from we shifted to dance for film. Ooh, see, nervous. We shifted to dance for film. So basically what we did was we asked one of our friends who was a videographer, and we did site-specific work. So we actually physically distanced ourselves, and we did site-specific work, and recorded it, and he basically went home, put everything together, and made a video, and then put it online. And that was one of the ways that our dancers still felt as though they were still adding value to the community. They still felt like, okay, even though I don't have the mass number of people in the audience in this theater, they can still see me. You know, from that artist perspective, that artist side, you're just like, oh my gosh, I have so much to give, and I feel like I'm not contributing. And that was one of the ways that we got through it. What was the other part of your question? I apologize.
I think the other question was just being challenged to find dance instructors. And I know that everyone has had that challenge before them. And how did you guys manage to work around it? Was that an issue for you? Maybe it was not.
It was and it wasn't. Florida Dance Theater specifically has, and I'm really grateful for the staff and the faculty that we have. They're trained in different areas of dance, different styles of dance, and so it was really, really great for us just to shift. Like if one person said, okay, you know, I really, because we did have that. We did have some instructors say, you know, I can no longer do this because COVID happened. I'm not going to come back. And so then if I didn't jump in, because I'm trained in classical ballet, modern dance, and jazz, if I didn't jump in, you know, I had someone else who was willing to step in and say, okay, you know, I see this need, I'll do it until we find someone. You know, that was what we dealt with. We dealt with, a lot, to be quite honest, a lot of burnout, a lot of, you know, we had those moments. And so we extended a measure of grace to each other during those times, you know, to get through it. But at this point in time, we were fortunate to reach out to artists in Orlando and the Davenport area who were with like Orlando Ballet or the Ailey School in New York that have moved from New York and started their own organizations. So we reached out to them, and they commute because they believe in the organization, they believe in the mission, and so that's how we were able to get through.
Well, thank you for what you do. I would say that dance is probably the most popular art, and a lot of kids are not exposed to it. So being able to offer them dance instruction at a very reasonable or no cost, I think is amazing. And you're reaching the kids that sometimes they don't get reached outside of their home. So thank you for all that you do in our community.
Thank you.
Hello again, good to see you. It's been a while. Ms. Fields has mentioned how much it means for children to be exposed to the arts early on. Sometimes we look at our academy programs and our specialized programs and the diversity in them and the lack of diversity, and it's because the students were never exposed or hadn't had the opportunity when they were younger. Can you talk a little bit about how this is sponsored or promoted within the community, and how this could be used at several schools? Like what is it fundraising? How is this, other than staff, what are your challenges to duplicate this program in other schools?
It's a very interesting question. So a large portion of our programming is grant funded. So I go behind the scenes and I apply for grants for different foundations, and I say, okay guys, so the Give Well Community Foundation is a great supporter. Public Supermarket Charities is another great supporter. The Iron Horse Family Foundation is another great supporter. The State of Florida Division of Arts and Culture is another great supporter. So with all of these supporters, I take these opportunities, I create the program, I write the grants myself, and I then go to the schools and I say, hey, this is an opportunity that we would like to provide. Do you have any interest? Do you have a group of students do you think would be benefiting for this program? And so we were fortunate to have Crystal Lake Elementary School. These projects and programs are advertised through the school, more or less. We're really more so trying to expand that more. We had partnerships with Polk County Library Cooperative, and I sent out the information to them there. They said that they would also distribute that to everyone else there. It's usually also on Facebook, Instagram, like the homeschool group networks and things of that sort.
Thanks. And this might be a question for the superintendent. So how, if another school's watching this and say, yes, we have a population that would benefit greatly from this opportunity, how would they reach out to do that?
Is it a question for me?
I guess so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what they could do is go on our website and, see, my contact info is there. They can also reach us at floridadancetheater.org and just send an email, and we'll definitely follow up and see how we can connect.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Superintendent. Jermaine, leave it to you, the artist, to not live in the rearview mirror and just to be able to look out in the front and really bring some innovation. And you've really demonstrated that very well. The whole Florida Poly scenario, motion capture work and so forth, very innovative. And then to see all of your practices then shared with our students at Crystal Lake Middle, or Crystal Lake Elementary. Thank you. Thank you for being innovative, and then also bringing the arts, which really is a nice connection to the sciences as well. So as you demonstrated with the Florida Polytechnic connection, because it's all about math, right? There was a lot of counting in that video that you demonstrated. Next year, when you do the Nutcracker, I'm assuming you'll do it again, right?
We will. Yes.
Okay, I hope to see you back at Crystal Lake Elementary, but do you see other opportunities at other schools to integrate and assimilate our students into some of those productions as well?
That's very interesting you asked that question. I was talking with our staff about what next season would look like, because we're getting to the time where we do need to start laying down those little nuggets, basically, planting those seeds. And so we're looking for different avenues and different ways that we can, again, create this opportunity and not just have it centralized in Lakeland, but then extend it out to, other areas like Bartow, Lake Wales, Winter Haven. How can we then expand and grow? Just to say for now, I'm always causing trouble. It's good trouble, good trouble. Is there feedback? I hear it. It's echo. We are working on some things to expand it. That's all I can say for now.
Yeah, thanks for giving us a vision. One area, too, is you think about the dance on film aspect. Think about our media programs within our schools as well, and our student media initiatives that we have. We have some great videographers around our schools that would love to take part. So appreciate what you're doing. And Jeanette Crowley, thank you for organizing and really bringing all the community partners to us. Really enjoyed hearing from them throughout our time in the work session. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And as you leave the dais, let me address a few questions from the board. So to Ms. Miller's point, if there was a school that had an interest in this, they could reach out to us directly. They can reach out through their regional. They can contact the organization directly to get some information. We have had very recently several meetings with our larger after-school providers who are looking for what new concepts, what new program expansion opportunities do we feel we need. And there's an opportunity, obviously, there for a partnership where they could subcontract to fill the dance needs at some of those schools if interested. The other option, and it's something that I'll work to follow up with you on through our fine arts team, is McLaughlin. McLaughlin, the board this year last school year, authorized for McLaughlin to expand to a 612, and so each year they're adding a grade level. McLaughlin is also supposed to have a fine and performing arts magnet academy, and so we're seeing that revitalized, and they have great facilities, great opportunities. So as you look to expand, just understand that would be a great partnership opportunity for us with middle school and high schoolers out in the Lake Wales community, which again, you could utilize that facility, and I'd love to see our students participate. And this gets back to, again, comments by Ms. Miller, Ms. Fields, and others, that we've got to create opportunities for our students to explore the arts while in elementary and middle school. But also, more than just the exploration, we've got to create the opportunity for them to fine-tune and rehearse those skills so that when they get the opportunity to apply to a Harrison, they can be competitive. And I think that, for me, that's a primary thing that I often have a concern with, is how do we create equitable opportunities, especially for students who otherwise financially may not be able to afford to have access to professional training or professional dancers and whatnot. So we, as an organization, as a school district, have the obligation to see how do we then replicate those opportunities for our students, and McLaughlin presents that opportunity for us. So I'll follow up with you as well with our fine arts team. But I'll also speak to some of our after-school providers to see what opportunities may lie there to expand this for our students. So, and that would include some grant funding and some things like that. So I'm not making any promises here either. And I won't disclose the finances behind it, but we'll talk soon. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next item before us is the ESSER II Civic Literacy Excellence Grant. There's going to be actually two parts to this presentation. I'll ask Mr. Baldwin to present second. I'll ask Mr. Cochran to come up first with his team to do an initial presentation. I received a lot of questions about the grant, about this topic in particular, and received and fielded several questions from several board members for additional background. Just as a reminder, Polk State was awarded a very large grant to help develop a civics curriculum. If I recall correctly, they were one of two colleges, or three colleges, thank you, who received that grant funding. So we've been working with them locally. Then the grant was expanded to create civics academies. And so that's the part that Mr. Baldwin will talk about, is we've received some initial funding to start to create those academy models. And we'll address each of your questions that were submitted today. But again, I wanted to go ahead and provide the background. You approved and were aware of that grant last school year when it took place. This is now the extension and how it's going to impact our community. This is very much in alignment with our Civics Academy that I've spoken about in the past, where our goal is to create partnerships with all of our municipalities. And I think you were present when we heard, as a matter of fact, I know you were present when we heard from the former leader in Auburndale, when he talked about the fact that their new village, or their new manager started out mowing lawns for them. And they saw talent in him, and over time they paid for him to go to college, they paid for him to earn his certifications, and now he has risen through the ranks. And so quite honestly, it's a great example that there are opportunities for our students in each of our municipalities. And we want our students to be civic-minded, and not only civically minded, but civically engaged. And so can we create a positive atmosphere for them? So this is not just about fire rescue, EMT, and police academy. This is about how do we get them into small government, how do we get them into local operations and involved in our municipalities. And there are, as you are aware, there are so many potential pathways, career pathways and opportunities there. Waste management, facilities and operations. I mean, it's just incredible what they can get involved in. So I wanted to set the stage a bit, and I'll turn it over to the two of you to talk specifically about the initial grant and how we're getting to today's presentation. We will take a very short recess after this presentation because Mr. Pitts informed me that we're waiting on some materials that are being finalized to hand out to you, so that will assist us throughout the budget conversation. So now if they're ready before, then we'll just continue and take a break later. But at this time, Mr. Cochran, please.
Hi, good morning. Very pleased to be standing here today to talk about this great opportunity that was created between Polk State College and Polk County Public Schools. Before I get started, I would like to introduce our partner in this endeavor, Catherine Goebel, who is the coordinator for the Civics Grant for Polk State College. So she has the first part of this. She's going to tell you about how this grant came to pass and how it's being administered. And then I'm going to talk specifically about what we're doing in the schools. So, Catherine, please.
Thank you. Good morning. So I am the director of the Civics Career Pathway Initiative at Polk State College, and one of the goals of the Civics Career Pathway Initiative is to establish civics career academies in conjunction with our local schools. Now, you may be aware of the Civics Literacy Excellence Initiative. It was announced by Governor DeSantis in July of 2021. So this project has actually been quite some time in the making. This initiative had $106 million to establish the entire initiative, with $65 million going to the Florida Civic Seal of Excellence training, $16.5 million for training, professional development, and classroom support in civics, $17.5 million to reinforce civics curriculum and align them to new best standards, and $6.5 million to create a career pathways for public service program. And this is where Polk State College comes in. Polk State College was awarded the entire $6.5 million, and we are working with two other colleges, Broward College down in South Florida and the Florida State College at Jacksonville. And so the three colleges are going to work together to establish civics career academies in our districts. So for us, that would be you guys. For Broward, it's Broward, obviously, but for Florida State College at Jacksonville, it's actually 2 districts, Duval and Nassau County. So we had a launching ceremony in July of last year. You can see President Falconetti of Polk State College, along with Commissioner of Education Manny Diaz and Governor DeSantis, along with the president of Florida State College at Jacksonville. So one of the things that we talked about is like, what is the purpose here? It's not what you're thinking about, like being a EMT academy or 911 operator or law enforcement or even a career in law. It could be those things. But this is really about combining 2 of the governor's passions, one of which is civics education, and the other one is workforce education. So we're trying to find a way to marry those 2 things and offer a broad array of potential careers to students, because the public sector is something that there's a lot of job opportunity and a lot of job security. So some positions graduates would be prepared for include grant manager, program analyst and support staff, permitting specialist, policy analyst and government affairs, human resource support specialist, project manager or caseworker, procurement specialist, or a city and county manager. So Polk State College has contracted with the Lou Fry Institute at UCF to develop the curriculum for civics career academies. If you are at all familiar with social studies and civics education in the state of Florida, then you're probably aware of the Lou Fry Institute. They're one of the experts when it comes to civics education in Florida. Walk in any civics classrooms in Polk County schools and you'll see teachers using materials from Lou Fry. The curriculum is to be implemented this upcoming school year, 2023-2024, and it does follow a cohort approach. They're developing 4 courses. Now, the courses can be taken in 2 different ways, and it's designed to give districts and schools the most amount of flexibility possible. So it's 4 courses, they're semester courses. So you could potentially take all 4 courses over 2 years. So you could do it your senior year, first semester, second semester, second semester, junior and senior year. Your other option is to do it over the course of 4 years, and then we have a list of potential classes that would pair with it. You could take, psychology or sociology or African American history or hope or dual enrollment, something like college success. So the 4 courses are public service leadership, public service careers and communication, public service project management and experiential learning, and a public service research seminar. So let me give you just a little bit more detail about those courses. So the public service leadership course is designed to learn how leadership is practiced and experienced in the public sector. This is going to be students' first opportunity to really realize how things work in our local and county governments. Public service careers and communication allow students to discover some of these careers in the nonprofit sector, and it also aligns with the Florida Civics and Debate Initiative. So this is something else that was launched by the governor a few years ago. And this really allows students to incorporate those debate skills and those interviewing skills and those speaking skills that they would use in public service. Schools are encouraged to participate in the Civics and Debate Initiative if they're participating in this program, though it's not required. We do have several schools in Polk County that are already part of the Civics and Debate Initiative. Public service experiential learning and project management. So in this particular course, students will be finishing up their project management certification. We have elements of that certification embedded throughout the courses, but the idea is that upon completion of this course, they would get their project management certification. So this is an industry certification, so it's going to allow for that acceleration. It's also a CAPE-funded certification, so that's going to be helpful for the continuity and the sustainability of the program. And we chose this particular one because in all public sector jobs that we could think of, there are elements of project management. So we thought that one worked. This is also your experiential learning, and we want to not say like a full internship because we know that there's a lot of safety issues, equity issues, and things like that with a full internship, but we want to provide students the opportunity to do things like service learning and job shadowing, and again, provide that flexibility for what works for schools and for students. The final course is your research course, and so students are taking what they have learned over these past 3 courses, and they're using it to identify an issue that could be solved by the public sector and proposing solutions to stakeholders. So our Civics Career Academies seek to serve all interested students. Polk State College will work with each participating school on prerequisites for entry that best suit their student population. Our suggested prerequisite, and it's only a suggestion, is that students have a passing score of 3 or higher on the Civics EOC. And the reason why we chose that particular prerequisite is because if schools decide to start this at the freshman level, they wouldn't have a GPA. But also, this shows that students have a basic foundational understanding of civics, and it doesn't really exclude a lot of students because civics is one of the highest scoring cells in Polk County. So you're talking over 70% of students that would qualify to enter this academy. Polk State College is also developing an articulation agreement whereby students who complete the 4 courses in the academy will receive college credit. We have a presentation to our Academic Quality Council at the end of the month to solidify how many credits that will be, but I can tell you that it will be at least 3, hopefully more. Students who complete the industry certification in project management will also have that industry certification. So potentially students could go immediately into the workforce with their industry certification, but we're also hoping that they'll have that college credit. They could enter into our AS in business, and we have a new focus or area of emphasis called public service. And they can even then potentially stack that into our BAS in business with a focus on public administration. So we're really trying to create that stackable pathway opportunity for our students. Finally, with regard to teachers, in order to teach the PMI Project Management Ready certification, teachers will have needed to pass the exam themselves. So we're offering 2 trainings for teachers participating in the academy, one at Polk State College Winter Haven on February 25th and a virtual option for teachers on March 4th. Teachers may take the project management certification exam on Polk State Lakeland's campus at the Collegiate High School Gateway, and that is for free. Teachers don't have to pay for that. Our budget also allows for teachers to receive a $1,500 stipend upon passing the PMI Project Management Ready certification. I don't want teachers doing any more work without being paid for it. I was a teacher myself for a long time, so I really believe in making sure teachers are rewarded for all the work that they do. In addition to that, they will have a training developed by Lou Fry on the new curriculum. It is asynchronous, it is virtual, they can do it anytime they want over the summer. Upon completion of that, there's another $1,500. And the reason that we chose that amount is it aligns with the Civic Seal of Excellence amount, and it's about the same amount of hours of work. So finally, what we would like to do is we would like to subaward Polk County Public Schools some of the money from this grant. At first, we were trying to do it all ourselves, and then we realized it is very difficult for us to, say, purchase equipment and then give it to you guys because it creates an auditing nightmare and also a maintenance nightmare. So our subaward includes several things. Stipends for teachers. So we're going to give that money to you so that you can distribute it to teachers who pass the project management certification and who complete the Lou Fry Institute training. Stipends to cover the cost of substitutes because we are doing a professional learning trip to Tallahassee so that teachers can see the legislative process in action, so they can see us go up there and try to advocate for schools and advocate for our colleges. We also have a tour of the Supreme Court, a meeting with Dr. Falconetti, so we would need substitutes for teachers for 3 days for that. It also includes stipends for district staff and school network managers for the procurement and maintenance of all of this equipment. The cost of educational materials and supplies, the cost of equipment to support curriculum instruction, and 5% in indirect costs. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Cochran.
So the participating schools that were chosen and the process for choosing those schools, there was a presentation done with Catherine, myself, and Regional Superintendent Collins to the high schools, and the presentation on what would happen in the civics grant and how that would impact their school, and what a great idea we think it is. And we had these 6 schools step forward: Auburndale Senior High, Fort Meade Middle Senior High, thank you, Kathleen Senior High, Mulberry Senior High, Ridge High School, and Winter Haven Senior High. All stepped forward and said that they would like to participate in the civics grant. One of the reasons that we asked them to step forward is this has got to be placed in the school with existing units. While the grant is wonderful and is paid for a lot of things, basically the majority of that money is in creating this curriculum and setting it up. And additionally, when the grant ends, there is a issue with when it ends, we could not fund teachers going forward. So we needed to use existing units, and the schools figured that they could find those units at their school and make this program happen. So that was one of the reasons that we asked for schools to volunteer, because we wanted to make sure it worked, and also we wanted them to have ownership. This is something that they want at their school, something that they're looking forward to. So Superintendent Hyde shared with me some of your questions in advance. I'm sure there'll be more at the end, but I do want to answer some of the questions that had been presented to him. Is there a career and technical student organization? Yes, there is, the Florida Public Service Association. Are there certifications? Well, she did kind of hit that hard. I think everybody now knows that it's the Project Ready Manager. I do want to make a note that it is on the Florida CAPE list for this year. CAPE list fluctuates. If there is some change, we'll look at another industry certification. Question, in the executive summary, it states that the program will end when the grant terminates. Does this mean that career academies will cease to exist? How will we pay for this program after the grant? The district will assume responsibility for this grant. Since we are, again, I think this actually adds to the strength of the program, since we are not depending on grant funds to pay for these units, and they already exist. When the grant ends, I will just pick it up in the workforce department and support it with the equipment and supplies that it needs, transportation and other issues. So the program will continue to go. It will be supported under workforce. Will there be enrollment goals? And what is the minimum threshold? So we're looking at, for the first year, because we're trying to roll this out, 15 to 25 students. And each year, new enrollment goals will be set on the academic improvement plan or the program improvement plan. We will only cap enrollment based on staff and space. Will there be a focus on specific careers in the public sector? This program will cover the broad range of jobs and opportunities that are in government. I don't have to tell the board how many opportunities there are just here in the school system. The local government and municipalities offer many diverse and variety of different jobs. So we are, I know we talked about project management and people sort of working in administrative jobs for their local municipalities. But this is going to also expose those students, because not every one of them is going to go into one of those fields, but it's going to expose them to the opportunities that are available across Polk County and within our local governments. And at a minimum, it's going to make them aware of how much we do. So there's a lot of diversity available in the public sector positions. How are we incorporating our public sector partners in selecting the curriculum and including the industry certifications and internship opportunities? Well, as was stated in the presentation, the curriculum is still being developed. We are rolling out and starting to advertise the Civics Academy at the school showcases. Catherine will be there, and one of her representatives from Polk State College. They plan on being at all 4 of our school showcases to talk to students and parents about the opportunities in the Civics Academies. Additionally, Catherine will be presenting to the advisory board, the Academy Advisory Board, this month. And once the curriculum is complete, we will organize a meeting with the local human resource representatives from the local municipalities and see what kind of collaboration we can get. In my initial cursory conversations with the local municipality people that I do business with every day, they are very excited about this grant and the opportunities that it presents. I think this could be one of our most collaborative efforts that we've had in our academies. So I'm very much looking forward to the opportunities this grant presents. So that concludes our presentation. Are there
Hang on,
any?
Steve.
Oh,
Let me jump in and just clarify.
Yeah.
So under the Q&A, when we talk about enrollment goals, year one enrollment goals would be a minimum of 15 to 25 students per school, per cohort. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that. We're not spreading 25 kids across 6 schools. And part of that is when the high schools put together their master schedule, we have always dictated a minimum number of students. Academy programs, career tech ed, workforce development, magnet programs, at times during the first 3 years are provided some grace. For example, 15 students in a class is not typical. We try to maximize seat occupancy to maximize our efficiencies. However, as programs are rolled out, historically, we have allowed up to 3 years at times, we've provided additional positions during those times to ensure that there are no restrictions or limitations to enrollment. So what typically happens is if we just rely, and I know Steve mentioned that's where we're starting, but as we watch the enrollment interest increase, we very well may have to increase staffing at some of these schools prior to the launch. Because the reality for some of our students is if it's limited to 1 instructor or even 2 instructors on a campus during a specified period of time, if that's in conflict with their AP Calc and that's the only time frame that they can take class, they're going to forfeit this program to take the AP Calc. We don't want to create forced schedule decisions like that. And so, again, I just wanted to make sure I reiterated to you our commitment to honor what we've done historically, and we will create that flexibility. That has also been a concern that Steve and his team have brought to us consistently, is staffing at the high schools has made it very difficult to cohort schedule our workforce development, career tech ed, and our academy programs, which is recommended very strongly by the national agency who comes in and certifies our programs. And so we are gradually moving in that direction based off enrollment. Now, there are programs, for example, if we start out with 6 schools and one of the schools just for some reason over 2 years just cannot get the program up and running, we will not continue as a district. At that point, I will come back to the board and say, we're going to shelf this program at this school because it's just not drawing the student interest. And so the ROI is not there, and there may be a different program that's of greater interest on that school campus. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that the geographic location, so I appreciate that we went out, and I'm a huge proponent for asking school administrators what programs they feel confident and have an interest in sustaining. Moving forward, this goes to one of Ms. Miller's frequent questions. If an administrator changes or leaves that building, we will ensure that anybody who's hired and comes in has that same passion and commitment to support these programs. Because that way you don't end up with that roller coaster effect of programs being incredibly successful because they get a high level of support, and then it diminishes because the interests move or transition, and then we come back. So our concern is to ensure that, again, asking administrators what do they have an interest in, what can they support, what are they going to put their energy behind. That's really important to have the right leaders with the right enthusiasm promoting these programs, and then again the sustainability over time by ensuring we have the right people, succession leadership in place to ensure its future success. So I just want to make sure I clarified that part as well. I was pleased, they did a better job of addressing the public sector roles. We covered just a handful here in the presentation, but there's everything from, planning, civic planning, engineering, logistics, traffic mitigation, law enforcement. Just the opportunities for our students are endless, and so we're really pleased to have the opportunity to start talking more aggressively with our municipalities, even our own emergency operations center. When we talk about disaster preparation, that's a great opportunity for our students potentially on a career pathway. So, we look forward to being able to place more students more frequently in those areas. So it's an exciting time, it's an exciting program, and I'll go back to the speakers list. I believe Ms. Wyatt was first. Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. Just touching, I know you, in your response about partnering with the public sector employees currently, that you talked a lot about for internships and kind of on the tail end. Have there been any conversations and partnerships with them around curriculum, around what industry certifications you're offering? Is it an industry certification that they care about or that they think is valuable? Because that's where we've, I think, seen some concerns for some of our other academies.
That's a great question. So the Lou Fry Institute is developing the curriculum, and they do have community members on their advisory board. So they are participants in developing the curriculum and also any supplemental materials that would go with the curriculum. Yes, we did talk about this particular one. Now, a lot of municipalities said that this is step one, that they would like the other project managements. There's further ones that somebody would do with an AS degree or with a BAS degree that they think would also be useful. But yes, everybody agreed that project management is something that is involved in everybody's daily work.
Okay, and when you say that there's community members involved, are those local community members or just?
So they are from Broward, Polk, and Duval.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Miller.
Thanks. I'm so very excited about this academy. Chair Wyatt and I both have advanced degrees in public administration, and knowing and not getting into that until my adult life, if I had the opportunity in high school, I think that was something that would have caught my attention. And working with our cities, I do represent the city of Auburndale and know the story of how they want to build their own leadership. And I think all the municipalities will take part in that. So I know they have bought in to help. They're ready for interns. And I know that principal worked to promote the academy, because my only concern, and I appreciate the superintendent bringing up the biggest concern, which is a monetary and interest concern, where we have great programming until we get a new principal who may not know of the program or may have a different vision, and all of a sudden that money is gone and all the program is gone. And I was flabbergasted when I got on the board and found out we did that. So I'm glad that we've fixed that issue. The other issue is the students. I remember one of my other schools, there was an academy that they were just kind of gearing, kind of pushing the students to, and the students didn't know what it was. Logistics was a difficult academy to explain. So is it up to the schools to provide the promotion of that academy? Or does that come from the district to help promote with our community outreach that we're doing now? But are the schools going to be promoting what the academy will be to the students, so they're making informed choices on that?
There's actually, I'll jump in real quick, Steve. There's actually two steps to that. We will provide the information materials and we'll market it more globally across the community and with parents. But yes, ultimately, it does fall to a school, their guidance counselors, and their staff to communicate to students, not just this academy, but any academy option that's on their campus, and really market it and sell the program to kids. They need to go out and recruit students for their programs. So it is owned at two different levels. It's owned at the school level, and it's owned at the district level. However, we will provide the marketing materials to define this, because as you mentioned with logistics, even this, we're gonna have to define really well for students and families so that they see the value in the career outcome possibilities, because otherwise they may not understand it fully, just like the logistics one. And I think that's where we ran into some issues, is when you think about logistics, many of the individuals involved thought we were just talking about students having to work in a hot warehouse, and they don't realize how many other options there are. And so we're glad to see that program being revitalized at this time. So Steve, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I did just want to add that this year we're very fortunate to have Catherine with us at all four of the school showcases to lay this out to parents and potential students. Going forward, though, it'll be an academy at each school, and when they go to their school showcase or have their open house, they will need to put that forward to the students. And honestly, I know last year was kind of a quick startup at Auburndale for the Logistics and Manufacturing Academy. So maybe enough information didn't go out to the students at that time.
Yeah.
But, this year, I think we're getting a really good jump on the Civics Academy.
And it wasn't at Auburndale, it was at the academy before that we had it at previously, and it was a tough sell to kids who told me personally, I was put in this academy and I have no idea what I'm doing here. So the fact that the principals have volunteered, they've had a voice in it, I think that will be helpful. And the students, and I can tell you, even talking to a city planner of the city of Lakeland, who was in interior design in college until she took a class in planning and shifted her whole career into planning, I think you're gonna find students from different areas that you wouldn't imagine be interested in, that would be awake, that love of planning and city development and things they might not find too exciting will become exciting for them in high school. So this is really great for our community. My last question is, as they move out, so we get them in, they love what they're doing, they find a niche within public admin, they want to continue. We can move them to Polk State, where you're offering business degrees with those concentrations in different areas.
Correct.
Okay.
So one of our goals was to establish a stackable pathway. So students can graduate high school with this industry certification and potentially go straight into the workforce. However, what we've also done is we have an AS in business already. And that's another thing that I think makes our program unique, is that the college credits they earn are towards an AS degree.
Right.
But we actually have a new area of emphasis in our AS degree called public service. And we actually have courses that align very similarly to the courses that we have here in high school, so that if somebody from outside the high schools wants to come in, they can also do the public service. It doesn't have to be someone from this academy, but we do have that public service area of emphasis with our AS, and we have the public administration focus for our BAS. And it's an incredible opportunity for students because you can get a BAS with us for about a third the price at one of the universities.
No, I think this is a great opportunity. I'm really excited to be a part of it. Thanks for presenting today.
Thank you.
Mr. Sharpless.
First, I just got to say this. I'm super excited for this. This blends two passions of mine with civics education and career technical education. So that's the first comment I have to say. So thinking through this, I think the industry certification seems to me to be appropriate, and as well as partnering. I think it's an amazing opportunity to partner with our county and municipal governments. Another thought, yesterday I attended my first Polk Vision Operating Board meeting, and Polk Vision also, one of their key areas is civic engagement. So definitely might be a group to reach out to partner with in these career academies. One thing that I mentioned yesterday at that meeting is and Mr. Cochran, me and you have had a conversation about this before too, the opportunity. Creating a new career academy like this gives us the opportunity to track our students. What's happening to the alumni of this program, once they're earning these industry certifications, once they've potentially gotten an AS, are they actually going into public service? And so I think that's an opportunity we have now, starting at the ground level, once we have these first cohort graduated. And the final point I have is, in addition to the industry certification, in addition to the AS opportunity, if nothing else, I believe a student will graduate a program like this and an academy like this just more civic-minded. The ability to engage in civic life in public service, I think is something that, is a skill, not a skill, more of a competency that we need to be developing in our school system. So thank you for taking the initiative, and thank you for the sub-grant award. I think this is huge.
Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Superintendent. First comment, maybe a question I'm going to throw to you, and then just a couple comments to our guests today. Logistics and pathways, those two comments really stuck out to me because just yesterday we're driving around in the afternoon, and my son decides to take that moment, I don't know why, and pulls out his phone and launches into Naviance and starts, his career planning. But really his trajectory of his coursework all the way through, and he's a 10th grader. And, when I'm hearing you speak about the pathways and the logistics to that, I'm curious, now we're using Naviance, is that correct?
Steve,
In some selected locations, we had been using district-wide. We had been using My Career Shines, which had been funded by the state of Florida. That funding stopped this year. So in order to continue to meet state statutes, which requires that we have an electronic career inventory, we continued to contract with the Cooter Corporation, the makers of My Career Shines, for this year and this year only. And next year we will pick up the what the state is offering for free, which would be Naviance.
Okay. Because I do see that as an opportunity for us to really help parents and students as they choose those pathways to really scaffold the 4 courses, So we can really maintain retention. You know, when a student is interested in an academy, to clearly see that if they're going to be pursuing this career academy, that there's scaffolding on top with, you know, those courses, especially as they're doing their own planning within their household and so forth.
We will have a precursor to Naviance or similar career planning software. If you recall, we will develop by the end of the year an app where students and parents can enter their child's or their own personal interests. What that will then do is it will create a refined list of academy magnet programs and whatnot that would align to those specific interests. That then puts them on the right path for application, and then career pathway information would come in behind that. And then a lot of that will be hosted in Schoology, so we get that single pane, single sign-on approach for our students and families.
Great. So this comment, we have a responsibility to ensure our students are prepared to be great citizens. Governor DeSantis quoted that. I saw that in the press materials around this initiative. So really thanks to our governor, the legislators, Dr. Falconetti, and you guys from Polk State College. Awesome opportunity. Really excited about it. And you had noted it in your presentation. It's really going to complement the Florida Civics and Debate initiative. And even on the list of schools that we have that's going to take part in this, I think we have 2 that are already involved with that debate initiative. I think Winter Haven High School, so great kudos to them to really see the vision to couple these 2 together. I think would be extremely beneficial to those students. We need every student to obtain a career certification and college credit. That should be mandated, required, should be our policy. In Polk State College, you have demonstrated this very well. To me, this is a great example how you're going to come alongside and partner with us to really demonstrate how we can enable our students to have that certification and that college credit wrapped up in the academy itself. So in the conversation around the PMI, excellent certification to wrap in that. And I think going back to what Mr. Sharpless was saying, you know, and tracking the data moving ahead as our students go through the academy and they graduate and so forth, I think that'll be a hard one because the PMI, I see that in so many other disciplines as a requirement. This would be, so for example, game design, film, all these disciplines love that PMI certification because you're managing projects. So I think that's a great one to couple with this. So really appreciate the partnership and what you're doing. So we look forward to this and the impact it's going to have on our students.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Fields.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a great opportunity for our students, and it aligns what we already have done or are doing with Citrus Ridge. I went back and I looked at the history, and in 2016, because of the efforts of former Congressman Dennis Ross, we created a Citrus Ridge Academy that focuses on civics. So it'll be interesting to see how that will align with what is being proposed here at Polk State College. So my question, I have 2, is what school would the students that are currently at Citrus Ridge be aligned with? Is it Ridge? Okay. And at some point in time, I think it would be great to have some type of presentation on what we actually are doing at Citrus Ridge Academy Superintendent Hyde, so that the board can understand that we are really ahead of the game. This is something that is not new to us, and maybe being able to not just have something at Citrus Ridge Middle School, but at some of our other middle schools as well. So I think that's going to be very important. And the other thing that I wanted to get clarity on is the requirements for testing before they are they are accepted for the academy. I couldn't go back and find the slide, but I think it said they have to have a 3. So what if they don't have a 3? Because
It's a suggested prerequisite. We're working with schools and allowing schools to determine that. It was just our suggested one.
There will be flexibility in that.
and that's good, because I remember in the past, we've had students who wanted to get into academies, and because they didn't make a score, they were not admitted. And then when John Small was involved, he went back and he revisited that. So I want to make sure that we don't close somebody out that really wants to be in the academy because they didn't score what was expected. So I'm happy to hear that there's going to be some exclusions of that. Thank you, Superintendent Hart.
Ma'am, thank you. Thank you both. Mr. Baldwin, if you'll come forward to at least provide the summary, the financial summary and the impact analysis.
Good morning, everyone. This is going to be a sub-award to Polk County Schools through Polk State College. It will function almost identically to a normal federal award, so we'll have in place all grant protocols, internal controls, management mechanisms, that type of thing. So for all intents and purposes, it's just a federal grant to us. The total amount is just over $670,000, with the majority going to the purchase of equipment, some stipends, and some other things that Mr. Cochran and Ms. Goebel-Smith mentioned to you guys. The logistics going forward is that we anticipate sending the subrecipient award agreement to you for the January 24th board for you to approve. Once signed, then we will be able to go ahead and initiate the purchases and start signing the teachers up for the trainings that they are wanting to attend.
Fields asked about. Ms. Fields, we are committed to expanding the academies down through the middle school level. I feel that that's a tremendous disconnect at this time. We typically, in most school systems, do this. We're all guilty of this across the nation. We oftentimes create a system where we tell students, wait till high school, wait till high school, wait till high school. The problem is the lack of information and opportunity to experience any of these things in real time at middle school places them at a disadvantage. So many of our students apply because of word of mouth. I have a sibling that attended that academy and they liked it, or my neighbor did, and so we have tried to market it to parents, more importantly, and we really need to shift that. The marketing needs to be directed at students, and it needs to start with hands-on opportunities in middle school. So we will continue the discussion. At some point, I will bring a topic back to the board about an elective wheel in 7th and 8th grade. Now, it'll have an opt-out, very similar to what we do for other things, especially for those students who just have a preference for the fine and performing arts. Ridge Academy does that. You know, all their 9th graders go into leadership unless they have an interest in the performing and fine arts. So we would go back to an elective wheel, but it would be a programmatic wheel where those students would get exposed to all of our career pathways and different types of programs in short durations, but enough for them to make an informed decision. What we hope to have happen is, rather than us, again, marketing directly to parents who may or may not help their child make that decision, what we want to do is stimulate the child and increase their level of excitement so that they go home. I mean, as a father myself, I can tell you, I pay a lot of attention at the dinner table, and always have, when my son says, I'm really excited about this, and he just keeps talking about it. And that signals to me it's a sincere interest on his behalf. How do I now support him? And so we want that to become the driving mechanism. Let's market through the kids based off their excitement. And so, yes, we will be looking to expand and push all of these things down into middle school. And there are some career academies, quite frankly, and industry certifications that students really are better off if they start during their 8th grade year. So we'll be looking at some of those as well as prerequisites. Adobe, Photoshop, and some of the others are great examples of that, which would allow them to accelerate their coursework in high school. So yes, ma'am, that is coming, and I'm excited to see that we're all in alignment. But we've been talking about this for about a year now, so thank you. I see no questions on the speaker list, sir, so thank you very much. Great job. And I'm looking to Mr. Pitts. Do we still need a 10-minute recess, sir? 10 minutes sufficient? Yes. Okay, Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like to request that we take a 10-minute recess. We will come back. We'll actually go a little longer. We'll come back at 10:25 if that's acceptable. Thank you.
And we are back. And I will turn the meeting back over to Superintendent Hyde for budget and staffing.
Madam Chair, members of the board, at this time, I'd like to introduce Jason Pitch, Chief of Staff. He'll be joined by Heather Jenkins, our Chief Financial Officer. We are getting to that stage every year where it seems like every meeting we will be talking about school budget as we get ready to not only finalize this year's budgeting process, but prepare to launch next year's proposed budgets for board approval and review. As you also know, you'll be receiving, not at today's workshop, but at an upcoming workshop, you'll receive the overarching organizational chart with any reflective or any responsive changes that may take place there. To date, based off our initial review, there have been minimal changes that you can expect to see in the organizational chart. In fact, there will be cost savings in one department, and I'll talk further about that with you. And that will be, actually a summary of that will be included in your weekly update. So, Mr. Pitts, I will turn it over to you for the budget.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good morning, board. How is everybody? Good. Yeah, Happy New Year. Thank you, Wes. I put a folder in your seat or on your keyboard there that has today's presentation in there, so you can reference much of the material. You need magnifying glass to read, so I thought I'd give it to you and you can take it home. And this is really going to be a short overview of our budget book. Ms. Jenkins and I had the opportunity to sit with Mr. Nolte and Mr. Sharpless over the past couple weeks to kind of talk about budget, and told them that this nice budget book is like your Bible for a while, because you can refer to it and it has a good description of our entire district in it. You know, I think I hear the analogy that the school board's like a battleship, but really the school board's like an aircraft carrier. And this budget book just does a good job to summarize everything that we have going. So let me get started here, and I may fumble through this a little bit. I'm a little nervous today. So I know, it's the first presentation for 2023. It's got to be good. So my hands are shaking. So it's not my health, it's just my nerves here. All right, so our budget timeline is based on the TRIM calendar. The TRIM stands for Truth in Millage, and it sets the budget calendar, adoption of budget calendar for all government agencies inside of Florida. So in November and December, we start to think about what this budget process is going to look like. We start to set priorities. Then in January, February, and March, we formalize that budget adoption schedule. Departments come up with their student projections, which we call PTM. Typically, you hear students referred to as FTE, full-time equivalent students, but just for this purpose, it's projected total membership. We review and create school personnel allocations, which are called blue sheets, because I think 40 years ago they were actually on blue sheets of paper. And we submit the indirect cost plan to DOE. That sets forth what we're allowed to charge grants and indirect costs to capture all of the overhead at the district that goes into those grants, and department budgets. Departments submit reorg proposals for the following year. We also give them their operating budget. And lately we've been focusing on contracts, trying to gain efficiency out of some of our contracts. So We have a review process for contracts. Carol Matthews is on there. I'm on that review. Our purchasing director is on there. Just hopefully we can catch where we don't have duplicate or redundant services through those contracts. April and May, we create the school budgets and send those out to the schools so they can kind of allocate their operating budget to the individual cost categories that they anticipate having. FRS, the Florida Retirement System rates are typically published in April or May. So that's when we learn about the additional revenue we're going to have to set aside to pay for those. Rates always go up. I've never seen the rates go down. And then we work on the tentative budget, which will include staffing. Then in June, we set those tentative budgets, including schools, debt service, workforce, et cetera. In July, we carry over capital projects. That a lot of time, that can inflate your budget. So let's say we have $200 million dedicated towards capital this year, and we only spend 50. We're going to carry over 150 million the next year, and that'll be added to that year's revenue. So it's one of those areas that inflates the budget artificially, and also transfers between funds. We don't transfer budget between funds very often, but we do for capital, debt service, and our internal service funds, which is like our health insurance. You'll see these ins and out for transfers in and transfers out, which also artificially inflates the budget. In mid-July, Ms. Jenkins will come back and ask your permission to advertise our tentative budget and our tentative millage rate. You have probably all now know that the school board is the only taxing authority in the county that cannot set its own millage rates. We have to levy what the state tells us to levy for operating millage rates. We'll advertise our proposed budget, and in a little bit we're going to talk about the rollback rate. You'll hear that referred to a lot out of the finance department. So the rollback rate is the millage rate that would generate the same dollar of tax revenue as the previous year. So if taxable value is increasing like this, the millage rates will tend to decrease like that, almost like an X, kind of looks like an X. And when the big recession in 2007, 2008 occurred, within a matter of 4 years, we lost a third of our taxable value. So as we've come out of that recession, government agencies have not been able to, I'll say enjoy, have not enjoyed or benefit that increase in taxable value because the state keeps rolling back those millage rates. So if we collect $1 more in taxes this year versus last year, when we advertise our budget meeting, we have to show that it's going to be a tax increase. I think of a tax increase more along the lines of a millage rate and not so much just the total number of taxes we collect. But that always causes a little angst. When folks see that in the paper, they want to know why the school board's raising taxes on them, and that's always a fun conversation to have, especially with retired folks who are on fixed income, and so that hurts their own available budget when property taxes increase. So we'll have that tentative budget and millage rate meeting in July. One of the reasons we have to wait until July is on July 1st, the property appraiser will certify the taxable value for the upcoming year. And then that's what the state will use to then determine what your millage rate needs to be in the following year. In August, we are finishing up, closing out the previous fiscal year. Summer is extremely busy in the operations department between finance and HR. We're closing out the previous year and staffing for a new year. So it's extremely busy in June and July, and I would say for the operations is probably the busiest 2 months of the entire year. So we close out the previous fiscal year. We approve the trim proof for the property appraiser. Heather or Ms. Jenkins she gets a file of everybody's tax bill, and she can spot check it to make sure that our millage rates are correct, the exemptions folks are getting on their property are correct. And then each taxing authority reports back to the property appraiser that they're good with it, and then those proposed property tax statements are sent out mid to late August. So we can start collecting tax revenue November the 1st. So in November and December, we see a huge influx of cash because most folks pay their property bill in November or December so they can get a discount. If you wait until January is really even, and then they assess sort of like a late payment if you don't pay it by January. So we see 80%, I'm going to guess 80% of our cash comes in November and December. Now the funds that we receive directly from the state, we receive in 2 payments a month, typically the 15th of the month and the last day. Those are funds that we pay charter schools. So what we have seen over the last few years is as the number of charter schools across the state has increased, statutorily we have to give them their monthly payment by the 15th of the month. So what you've seen over the last few years is districts having to take out what's called a TAN, which is a tax anticipation note, to float their cash between July and August until they start receiving those New Year tax revenues. And so citizens are paying interest for those 3 months so districts can give charter schools their funds. Now, we've been fortunate, and I don't know that we've ever had to take out a TAN. We watch our cash flow very closely, but that could be something that we have to do in future years as we add more charter schools to the budget. Then in September, well, back to August, we then complete and publish this nice budget book, and everyone gets their own personal copy. And in September will be our final public hearing to adopt the budget and final millage rates. After that's adopted, the finance department then uploads the approved budget to the DOE website. We certify that budget and millage rates, and then we distribute the official trim documents that go to the Department of Revenue, property appraiser, and the tax collector. Property appraiser sets those millage rates, and the tax collector collects taxes. This is a very casual, this is like budget finance 101. I know that some of you are really at a graduate level, so this would be like 501, maybe a 5, if you're familiar with how those classes work. So please, as I go through each slide, please raise your hand or let me know if you have any questions. Ms. Miller?
Trying to follow the rules, Jason.
I'm sorry.
I just have a question earlier on. You talked about the contracts. You have kind of a team or people that look at those. My question is, and we've talked about this in the past, is there, so we're looking at them for, is it compliance? I mean, we've talked about in the past contracts we've had for a really long time and different category spending where a certain department may have not bidded out whatever services or tangible items they needed. At the last minute, they're renewing contracts for higher amounts than we probably could get them for. And it might be small dollars, but lots of small dollars equal big dollars. So more of an efficiency look at that. Is that what you're doing, or are you just doing compliance stuff?
It's primarily compliance.
Okay.
When a contract comes up for either your approval or the superintendent's approval, the funding has to be already dedicated. So we reserve, when that item goes on e-agenda or board docs, you'll see the funding string. And besides the funding string, you'll see either a requisition number or what we call a funds reservation number. A requisition is more of an official workflow that gets turned into a purchase order that then gets sent out to the vendor. But for folks that it's just like maybe me coming back as on a contract to help out the school board, after I've left, that funds reservation is like an artificial way to encumber the funds.
So I guess for the superintendent, I guess this is going to be where the efficiency review committee will find, because, I brought you stuff before that, somebody's mentioned this contract we've had for 10 years or 5 years that really, we don't need to continue. We shouldn't have continued it that long. And it's, they're not huge dollar amounts, but it's significant. So I guess we'll rely on that efficiency audit or the efficiency committee team to review those operational pieces, and you're working on compliance that the dollars are matching.
So yes and no. So I want to clarify, if I may. There's two types of contracts that I think we're talking about. One is for goods and services. For example, our contract with Kelly Services for substitute services. That is a contract that annually is eligible up for annual renewal within a specified period of time, typically not to exceed 3 to 5 years. We are coming up on the end of that initial contract year, where we will probably go back out to RFP for those goods and services to see if there is more competitive pricing in the marketplace. So those types of contracts exist, as well as food procurement, things of that nature. Mr. Davis, for example, in transportation has contracts, maintenance contracts, warehouse supplies contracts. So those are reviewed, again, they should be reviewed periodically and should not allow for annual renewal beyond a specified initial period of time of 3 to 5 years. The second type of contract, which we did do a very thorough review of this year, are the continuing service agreement contracts. Many of those contracts, for example, cover our staff who will give up some of their time to be an accompanist for Harrison or for another school. These are the types of contracts that I sign seemingly every day. These are prom venues, these are field trips, these are those types of contracts. But if you recall, last year alone, we eliminated, we were fortunate to exit schools, and by virtue of that, we were able to eliminate some contracts for additional school supports that resulted in over a $2 million savings in that area alone. However, throughout that process, we also identified several individuals who were on CSAs and had been for 5 or more years. So, for example, these are employees who left the organization, but we continued to contract with because they had a unique skill set and or capacity that we never took the time to backfill. And so I met with Mr. Pitts and his team and basically said, you need to develop a process. I am very receptive to having somebody on a CSA for that initial year, if need be, for transitioning purposes. Not at their full salary. I don't think that's what we need. However, beyond that, we need to develop internal practices for succession leadership. SAP, for example, there's a contract out there in SAP that we have now brought them back in for more training so that we can eliminate some of those CSAs. Other CSAs, I mentioned some of the ones for like fine and performing arts. It's not uncommon for those to range anywhere from $250 to $1,500, depending on the duration of that person working with that performance. I did, for example, ask Ms. Cummings, who oversees the fine and performing arts area, to review that. and tell me, does it make sense? Do we spend enough on a pianist that we should just hire a full-time pianist for the district, you know? And lo and behold, no. And her budgetary analysis was very thorough, and it was actually, and that's a good thing, because we're looking at everything. The efficiency audit will look at our contracted expenditures. I actually had a meeting with them yesterday. We are well below the amount as compared to our role-alike peer group with contracted services. However, some of our contracted services, it's going to seem like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth. However, some of our contracted services for contracted employees seems excessive when you look at the percentage of contracted services. But that's easily explained. Right now, there's a deficiency in occupational therapists, physical therapists. There's a deficiency in certifications for those with mental behavioral supports and their certifications, guidance counselors, social workers, school psychologists. So when there's a glut, you know, or when there's a shortage of those individuals, we've talked openly here, we probably pay anywhere from a 30 to a 38% markup on those salaries by having to contract those services. So it looks like our expenditures on contracted services seems higher. The efficiency audit is absolutely drilling down at that. Mr. Green and the team were on a conference call yesterday when we got an update. Very pleased with the level of sophistication in their analysis that they're performing thus far, and the feedback we're going to get. So we're excited to launch that publicly on the 31st with our committee group. But I wanted to go ahead and take the opportunity to clarify. We are talking about two different contracts. We, as moving forward, will not continue to simply do an annual renewal of a contract beyond year 3 to 5. I believe that we need to come back to the table, re-advertise, or at least bring it back to the board to see what your interest is. But I've never worked with a board that says, yes, we should just have a contract with an individual forever and ever, simply because. I mean, we need, and we have an obligation to ensure that we're getting the best ROI, a return on investment, for our stakeholders and for our school district. So you will see more of those larger, long-standing contracts coming back before you and going out for RFP, a request for proposal, so that we can see if it's truly meeting our needs and if there's another competitive entity out there who could fulfill it at a lower price point for us. I'm sorry, that was a longer explanation than I intended.
Just kidding. No, that was excellent. Do we have a contract manager? Do we have a contract management position?
No, we do not.
Does districts our size? Yep. So that's something that we need to look at, employing someone who can do that. Because even categorical spending, some of our categorical spending, you and I have had long conversations, Jason Pitts, that I think could be managed.
We've learned a lot through those.
We have learned a lot. I think looking at a position to do that, that's what they would solely do, I think would be beneficial to us, my opinion.
We'll be bringing a contract for approval in the next few weeks. That is a contract management service, for lack of a better term. For instance, if someone in my office wants to order
We used to say paper towels.
paper towels, let's do paper towels, because sometimes those are hard to get.
And it's, with the public knowing that we're not talking about paper towels, but that's a good example.
So this software will look at the products we have under bid, and it will also look at what's out there in the marketplace. So we can always make sure that we're getting the best available price for those products. And it's going to help us track. One of the things that we ask for from departments when they submit their budgets are the number of their contracts and the dates for those contracts when they're up, because many of our contracts, it's year to year, but you got to give a 30 to 60, 90-day notice. And we've missed those in quite a few years, because as the new assistant superintendent of facilities comes on board here soon, they will find out the contracts that they have, because they will miss a renewal date. I mean, it's just the way it is with a number.
There's no way to prevent that.
Yeah,
There's no alert system to say the next 6 months you have 30 contracts that will renew.
I think there is. I think that's an initiative I would have to speak with Mr. Pitts, Ms. Pasco and her team. I think, yes, could we develop an internal dashboard that, because it is a date certain on all of those contracts when those dates come to fruition. Mr. Bridges, as you know, we have our contract review process, but Mr. Bridges is, we're very careful to make sure that the exit criteria is favorable towards the district, that we can basically separate from any contract at any time, typically just because it's our will. But to Mr. Pitts's point, many of our contracts require a 90-day notice. And if you miss that 90-day notice, at times I would be surprised if we didn't feel obligated to continue with the contract simply because of that clause. But yes, I think we could create an Excel file or some type of a warning system or dashboard that would capture all of those larger contracts, and maybe we focus initially on any contract $1 million and above to start with, and then look to see what that process might look like. So I'll make a note of that and bring you an update with Mr. Pitts at a future date on that.
Any other questions? Yeah, sorry.
Said some of it, is that it appears like we don't have a contract review process, but we do. And I know that Mr. Bridges and I believe Ms. Mathis review the contracts. Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
So I know that we have a process in place. We might not have one specific person, but none of the contracts should be coming to us or going to the superintendent without those folks being involved. Is that correct, Superintendent Hyde?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have 7, it goes through 7 folks to vet the contracts. And usually when I see that Ms. Matthews has approved a contract, I just go ahead and hit approve. I just know that she would have caught any fine detail that needed to be addressed. So thank you, Ms. Matthews.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Allen.
On this conversation, in the Bible, in the budget Bible, I don't have the chapter and verse, but you're going to get to it momentarily. I think it's noted that we have 8%, approximately 8.3% to be precise, that go out for contract services as part of our operating budget. So going back to what Superintendent Hyde was discussing, what is healthy? I mean, he says that we're way under. I'd be, curious to know what a typical number would be comparatively.
Well, and let me advance to a slide here. Let's see. You get to preview the presentation here, but all those animations. I got chastised already for that by Jason Geary.
Yep.
You do?
Maybe do page turns too. No, just kidding.
I wanted to point out, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Allen, about what percentage of the budget is.
Oh yeah, 7.4%. That's page 16.
16.
Yep.
Oh, here we go. On my slide, this is slide 46, so I'm not sure that you have the same. It's not like you have less.
Yeah, ours is on 16, Jason.
Okay, on 46, this is a breakdown of general fund budget based on those different categories. Salary and benefits. So charter schools are a pass-through. The state, every 2 weeks when we get funding from the state, that's funds that are supposed to be passed. A lot of that are funds that gets passed along to a charter school. We get to withhold administrative fees of between 3 and 5%. But other than that, we give the funds then directly to a charter school. That in our budget appears to be a contracted service. So in this slide that I have up now, if you back off the $130 million, $128 million that go directly to charter schools, instead of contracted services being 20% of our budget, it's really only 7.5% of our budget. So the question on how healthy is it? It's very difficult when 80% of your budget's tied up in personnel. There's just not a lot of flexibility. So those contracted services, and I'll give an example. Invo is a large contract that we've had in learning support. And we've given the ESC department some flexibility when the school year starts. Instead of, let's say, $50 million that they could have used towards personnel, if they don't have the staff, we give them that $50 million in contracted services so they can go out and contract. So, you know, if you look at the other categories, energy services, that's our utilities, our gas, materials and supplies, we're only talking 3 to 4%. You know, we can only cut back on printers and paper and that sort of thing, a small amount, but that is where salaries and benefits is where our bulk of our budget is focused on. So that's why, for instance, when FRS releases their rates, we'll have to automatically put that in our budget for the following year. So I hope.
So if I may, let me interject here real quick, Jason. So part of the initial survey and studies that's being done by the efficiency audit, to Dr. Allen's question, there is no standard number that's considered norm. Let me give you some examples. And again, as we compare ourselves to surrounding districts, to larger districts, Miami-Dade's contracted, their percentage of their general fund that they spend on contracted services is 31%. For Broward County, it's 25%. For Palm Beach County, they're at 21%. At Duval County, they're the highest at, looks like 36%. And we are, again, with charter schools included, we are at that percentage that Mr. Pitts shared with you. So it does vary. And I think the best benchmark for us, rather than trying to establish what a hard number is how do we compare to others? It is interesting, though, that while the percentage of our general fund is low, the amounts that we use comparatively are high because we're paying higher salaries for a lot of those vacancies. And to Mr. Pitts's point, a department like Exceptional Student Education cannot start the year out with 200 vacancies. We have an obligation to serve those students, so we end up contracting, and Invo is a very large contract. We've had that contract here in Polk County for a number of years because they started out serving as a staffing organization, a staffing agency for us. And so we employ, and I believe we spend well over $5 million a year on all Invo contracts, well, probably closer to $7 million, or if not more, on all Invo contracts together. That is a contract that's currently under review, not necessarily the staffing contract, but some of the programmatic aspects that they support is currently under review and under consideration for looking at other options. So I just wanted to provide you with some hard numbers to give you some comparative analysis, and I'd be happy to share some of these preliminary findings that that have been provided to me. Because right now they're marked as draft as they vet and make sure that none of their numbers are off, or before we make anything public. So. Thank you, Mr. Pitts.
That's very good explanation. Yeah, when someone resigns their position, first question is always, what's the date? Second question is, would you be willing to go on a contract to help with that transition? And I had mentioned the Assistant Superintendent of Facilities, Ms. Usher, is only going to be around with us for just a couple more weeks. We're trying to hire that position, but we will offer her a contract to help during that transition. You may have heard that Dana Torres, our payroll director, has been offered a job at University of Central Florida, and we will also offer her a contract just to help through that transition. Payroll is an area that I feel like it seems like we barely hang on. You start getting those complaints about supplements and all of that. So we can't miss a beat when it comes to payroll. So that's an example of a consultative services, what we call a CSA agreement. So this page, yearly calculations, has two hyperlinks in it. The first one says FTE instructions. And if you go out to the DOE website, you'll find this document, and it's very useful to understand, especially in the arena of FTE, how we earn dollars from the state. I just want to point out a couple things on this overview here. It becomes important, especially during our count weeks. We have a October count and a February count where it's literally is just counting, I call it butts in the seat. Then that gets reported to DOE. And if the teacher's not certified, we can lose and not get funding for the kids that are in those courses. So it's very important how we report that FTE to the state. You can see on this particular slide that there are areas that we earn additional FTE, advanced placement, depending on what a student scores on their AP test. Typically, they have to score a 4 or a 5. That program gets additional funding the following year to help support that program. That's where we're starting to kind of set a rule of thumb where when we introduce a new program, the district will support it for 3 years to help it get up and running. And then after those 3 years, that area should be supporting itself through the FTE that they earn. See, dual enrollment. Blended learning has become a very popular topic within the FTE of blending in-person and virtual courses. We've learned a lot through COVID. Calculations for students that are in the Department of Juvenile Justice. There's even special rules for that. So that's a good document for you to carry around and refer back to as you get questions that come to you. And we refer to calculations, a calc, quite often. And this hyperlink will take you to the web page that DOE has for the current calculation and all the previous calculations. So let's talk a little bit about what those calculations are. So the first calculation, which is also called the final conference report, is usually distributed either the last week before winter break or the first week after winter break. That's historically when we receive that first calc. And it's also what the legislators and the DOE use for their budget. They're based on that first calculation. And that's primarily the purpose for that first count. Second calculation comes through mid-July, and it's based on the certified tax roll from the Department of Revenue, from the property appraisers. So the only change that you'll typically see between that first and second calc is millage, taxable value, and millage rates are addressed. And when we receive that second calc is when we publish the tentative budget, because the tentative budget is based on that second calc that comes out in July. And typically it's a very short turnaround. It's usually sometimes it's been the day before we have to ask for permission to advertise that we get the millage rate from the state. Third calculation is typically released in late December or early January, right, which would be right now. That's based on the October FTE week. So not only is it important to have butts in the seat during that week, but standing up in front of the classroom teaching classes is just as important, so we can capture all of that FTE. And the funding is adjusted on the third and the fourth calc. So I'm going to try to give you an easy example to how to capture this for your reference. Let's say that the state is going to, the state is projecting we're going to have 10 students, and their budget's going to be $1,000 per student. Then in October, the count comes in, and there's 15 students that showed up. Now, the state is not going to, and so that would be like $100 per student, right, at that rate. 1,000 divided by 10 would be 100. And if 15 students show up, they're not going to give us that extra $500. They're going to adjust that down. So 1,000 divided by 15 will now be our funding per student. And that carries us through until the fourth calculation, which is based on February FTE week, and also some add-on FTE such as advanced placement, ACE. That's when we find out on those add-on. Early graduation, we get extra FTE if somebody graduates in December instead of May. So those are examples of additional FTE that we'll see included in that calculation. Industry certifications. We get extra revenue, and the teachers get a bonus based on the number of students that pass those certifications. So in that instance, we hold back, the district office holds back a percentage amount of that funding, and then after the teachers are awarded their bonus, then we distribute those funds back out to the individual programs so they can use them in their operations during the next year to support their program. The final calculation, or the fifth calc, is additional add-on FTE, but it's primarily virtual courses. So the main difference between a virtual course and a brick and mortar course is we only get funded if the student passes the test. So we may have a student in a class for, let's say, Algebra 2 the entire year. End of course exam comes up and they fail, we lose out on that funding per student, $7,000 to $8,000. So that's when those virtual classes show up. It's typically released in August. So those are the calculations that we'll refer to over the next few months.
I want to ask about virtual. Another conversation we've had multiple times. Polk virtual is what you're referring to, because that's our dollars.
Actually, it Polk and Florida virtual.
So that's a different district, right? Let's consider, we don't get the money for Florida virtual.
They are their own district.
Right.
They're the 68th of the 67 districts. And they were the state mandated virtual program.
Right.
And then I'm going to say 2010, 2012, there began to be a big focus on choice for parents. And at that time, the legislature enacted that every district has to have their own virtual school program. And there's basically two types of virtual programs. There's one that really follows a school calendar. The students are learning every day, almost like if they were in class. The other and the bigger program through Florida Virtual or Polk Virtual are just add-on classes driver's ed is a good example. Florida Virtual, Polk Virtual, both offer driver's ed for students that are, ready to take the test for their driving. So parents, if they choose that driver's ed course, parents don't have to pay the application fee for the exam. Students also get, I believe it's 6 hours of driving instruction. So that's a benefit. But when we talk about FTE, one student is one FTE. One student taking full class load is one FTE. So let's say that I'm a student at Auburndale High School, and I'm an overachiever. So I want to be able to take calculus when I'm a senior. So I'm going to have to take maybe a geometry and another algebra class early on to be able to take that class as a senior. So when a student passes those courses, the FTE, if they take it at Florida Virtual, is pulled out of the district and given to Florida Virtual, although we have that student all day long in our classes. Back when Florida Virtual started, it used to be actual add-on FTE. So districts got their full share and Florida Virtual got their full share. But then they call it recalibration. For instance, if a student shows up in the October count in Hillsborough, and then they show up in February in Polk will get half of the FTE, and Hillsborough will get the other half.
My question is there a way, and we've talked about this, I don't know how other districts run. I would like to break down the financials of Polk Virtual just a little bit more. We're offering a lot in that arena. Do some districts offer limited courses so they don't take the chance of losing that money?
Yes, and most districts, and I only know this because my wife works for Florida Virtual.
Oh, okay.
And she's always told how much revenue she brings in. Every year when she goes through a review, she brings in a couple $1 million to Florida Virtual through her algebra classes. But Florida Virtual has a private arm that was that software and program development, and they sell that to districts, other states, and even other countries. So if someone chooses to take a course through Florida Virtual, but they go on through Polk Virtual to enroll, we are using at least the software from Florida Virtual, so we're paying that fee, and we may be paying for their teacher too.
I think this is a whole nother work session.
It is a work session in and of itself.
Can I request that?
I will say yes, although I don't have the authority.
Thank you.
Any other questions along those lines? Ms. Fields?
Can you answer that?
My opinion is that the third calculation that comes out based on the October count is the most important. I mean, it's the most accurate because the first calculation and the second calculation are totally projections. So that's the first real number of students that we see is in that third calculation during the October, as they actually count. I think during that week, it's a 5-day count, and the students have to be there at least one of those days to get counted. So
Well, that's the one that the staff basically push. What I hear all the time is October that week. Thank you.
we stop short of bribing students to come to school that week. Close, but we stop short. Yeah. Dr. Allen?
Would typically have donuts on teacher evaluation days, so Going back to your analogy, you talked about when that calculation of 10 students, goes to 15. What happens if the count goes from 10 to 8?
The funding per student still stays the same, and the state puts that money in the bank. I think the last mid-year calculation adjustment was back in 2000 and somewhere between 2010 and through 2012. And I've got a slide that's going to show this in a little bit. But those were actual mid-year rate adjustments. So think about like we start our budget process now. Most important part of that budget process is staffing for next year. So we staff for a number of students. And then in the October count, not all those students show up, and the state changes that funding. We're already in the middle of a fiscal year. So it's been rare, but it has happened under some unusual circumstances. Any other questions? You guys are doing fantastic. There's only one of you that's close to nodding off, but I will call on you to answer a question here. All right, so looking at the budget, it really helps to compare other districts because a $2.5 billion budget doesn't mean a lot if you can't really compare. Now, I spent the first 10 years of my career working for Saddle Creek Corporation, and all that I did was create and analyze metrics because that's really how you can judge how efficient you are. So these next few slides are just some slides I put together when I came to the district to try to capture the essence of how we budget. So how do we compare to other districts? There's approximately 13,000 districts in the United States. Based on the number of students, we are currently 24th. Now those numbers, there's about a 2-year lag, and I'm pretty sure next year when these numbers get published, you're going to see a lot of movement because of COVID movement. We're seeing students come in from other states and other districts that want to come to Florida because school has been mandated to be in. We haven't shut down schools like we did back in February and March of 2020. So there are folks that come to Florida just because of that. In 39 states, we would be the largest school district. If you look at the 1,000 top, and it's based on size, the 1,000 top school districts, we are funded 995th. So we're in the bottom 5 of the top 1,000, and that's funding per student. And again, those numbers have like a 2-year lag also. So I expect to see some movement when these numbers are reported by the different agencies this next year. New York funds their students at the highest level. $24,800 per student is an average rate. Now, those of you that are from the Northeast, you know that school districts looked a lot different than they do down here in Florida. If Superintendent Hyde was superintendent in somewhere in New York, he may have 3 schools that he's superintendent of. I'm not trying to give him any ideas of moving out of Florida, but they have community-sized school districts. And those communities really take ownership of those schools. I'm going to throw out Tenor Rock as an example. What community owns Tenor Rock? Come on now, someone commit to a city.
Should be Lakeland, but
Okay.
it was built right between, way before I was on the board. It was built right between 2 cities who struggled to create community around that school.
Yeah, and that shows in the community support. You don't see the eye doctor, saying, "Go Thunder." It's going to say, "Go Hounds." So being a superintendent in a small district has those advantages of having that total community support. And that's one reason why Florida and Texas have such large districts. It helps with an economy of scale. You have less administrators, so in theory, more dollars are going directly into the classroom in those large districts. But we struggle to offer the support every year to our schools because of that. Now in New York, the average teacher salary is $87,700. West Virginia, I'm including that because our CFO is from West Virginia, and it's just a good comparison here. If I were to ask 100 people what's the poorest state in the union, a large percentage would say West Virginia. So West Virginia funds their students at $12,270. It's about 50% of what New York does. But their state budget is way more committed to education than Florida. Average teacher salary is $50,261 in West Virginia. And then we go to the very bottom state, no matter what funding information you're looking at, like the amount of property tax, taxes that are going to support schools, Florida is 51st because District of Columbia usually beats us out on funding. So we're definitely at the bottom of the barrel. And this year, I'm proud to say that our average teacher salary is $49,583. Not that that is an appropriate salary, but considering we're one of the poorest districts in the state and in the nation, we do place a higher priority on teacher salaries because for a fourth or fifth lowest funded in the state, you would think that our average teacher salary would be at the bottom, but we're kind of in the middle in Florida. Questions? I actually have a slide coming up that's going to address that. I knew you were going to ask that question.
Thank you.
Mr. Pitts, if I may, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Milton. Just a point of clarification. So we did work aggressively last school year. Within our first year, we successfully negotiated 2 contracts within a 12-month period of time. The second contract in working directly with PEA, and it was our mutual interest to meet the state's expectation of that minimum salary threshold because we had received those dollars. Part of our initial interest, just to be completely transparent, was the faster we could get to that minimum threshold, that minimum mandatory salary, the faster we can address compression. Because the overwhelming majority of funds that were provided to us in the first 2 years to raise the salary level, and this board, with the exception of our two new board members, knows very well firsthand the struggle that was when the state mandated and said only a very small percentage can be used to address existing employees who are second through 30-plus year employees. And that's a hard concept to get people to understand when the overwhelming majority of those funds was directed at that base salary. The fact that we were able to get to that base salary now allows us, and we're very excited about this year, and we have salary committees that are convening, we will be able to start working towards addressing the compression issue now. And we're very pleased that the state has announced that for school districts that have met the mandatory minimum salary threshold, that we will be able to use the full allocation to start addressing compression. It will take multiple years because we're talking again, if you look at the amount that the base salary moved last year alone, if we were to try and multiply that across every single year of service level, there's just not enough money. We couldn't print it fast enough if we wanted to. And so we're going to have to take a multi-year approach, and we're already starting that work now. So it's a good opportunity to remind everyone that we realize, and we are very much aware, that that is a huge issue for our veteran staff. That they feel, especially those working 10 years or less, they feel like, okay, I've been here 10 years, and I'm making the exact same amount of money as a brand-new teacher. How is that fair? It's not. But now that we've met that threshold, we can shift all those resources towards addressing those issues, and we fully intend to do so. So we're excited about this year and the work to be done, and I know PEA and others asked me, and everybody else joins us in focusing our intentions there. So thanks for letting me interject briefly, but I feel our employees need to hear that that is our commitment.
Yeah, and the unions were very instrumental in developing the pay scales that came out. We could not have done that work without their support. And then the Polk actually gets an extra funding compression allocation. I believe it was Kelly Stargell that was instrumental in bringing that to several districts that were experiencing what we're experiencing in Polk. And so there's an extra $6 or $7 million that we've received for the last few years to help with our funding compression. We'll talk about in a minute the DCD, which is the district cost differential. That is a cost of living index that's applied to each district. So for every dollar that we receive from the state in education funding, our DCD is currently 96.8. So a little over 3% is withheld from us and given to another district that has a higher cost of living. Now, the Florida Education, the FEFP, Florida Education Finance Program, was started in 1973. And when it was started, it was touted as one of the best funding formulas in the nation to try to address large school districts and small school districts, so that if a student comes from Gadsden County, where they only have 2 or 3 schools, and they move to Polk, they should be up, their learning should be on the same, but it should be seamless from moving to Gadsden into Polk based on, services that we offer, programs we offer. And that was the idea of that FEFP. Now, a couple of years ago, the legislators approved some money to re-look at that formula, and they haven't acted on that yet. But in the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you how important it is that we keep advocating for the state to review this formula. So we're 60 on funding. We're 62nd out of the 67. I mentioned Florida Virtual as the 68th. They're not included in this. Osceola, Lake, Okeechobee, maybe Pinellas. Those are our peer groups that are in that bottom funding part of the formula. And if you were to look at a map, it's the interior. It's the interior of the state, and because of property values. So a district like St. John's up in St. Augustine, they can't even spend their capital dollars because they just receive so much capital dollars because of property taxes. And in the interior counties like ourselves, we struggle, we limp along in capital funding. 7th largest in the state as for population or student enrollment. 35th in the state, I mentioned this a minute ago, for average teacher salary. Not great, but better than 4th or 5th lowest. And in fact, if you were to look, the state makes this information available. If you want to go out on their website, you can find it. But in several employment categories, such as principals, district staff, superintendent, teachers, paraprofessionals, custodians, food service, it ranks every district. And we're not we're not 60th in any of those. I mean, so we do place a higher priority on salary and benefits, which is reflective when you look at how much of our budget is salaries and benefits. I think for when we raised the minimum wage this past year to $15, we are paying as much as 60% of a position is just for benefits, health insurance, workers' comp, retirement. So we've seen that creep up from about 30% when I started at the district 10 years ago, now to positions cost over 50% for benefits. And when we bring forth the staffing plan, we list out the salary and the benefits for those positions. You can kind of see that. On administrative costs, Polk has consistently, every year that I've looked at this, we have been third lowest. Now, that could be a little bit of reporting issues. So on our cost string, and if you look at contracts, we'll list the cost string of where they're going to be funded at. The first 10-digit number is a cost center. So within the operating budget, finance has their own cost center, payroll has their own cost center, and down the line. Then we have the fund that they will use. General fund makes up about 50% of all of our funds. And then the specific, what we call general ledger account, GL. For instance, supplies is 451,000,000. That's the GL. The tricky part is what's called the function. Now that's a 4-digit code. You'll see the cost center. I hope everyone's taking notes on this because I'm going to ask it a little later. The first string of numbers is cost center. The second, Mr. Nolte, do you know what the second? Okay, all right, you just hang on, It's function, it's called function code. Then the funding is an 8-digit fund number, and then the paper and fuel and all that, you see line items for that. But the function determines how expenses are classified. So anything that has to do with instruction starts with a 5,000. General instruction is 5,100. So 80% of our teachers, that's where their salaries get coded to, is that general instruction. ESE instruction is 5,200. So we can keep track of how much we spend in general education, how much we spend in special education. Functions that start with a 6, those are activities that support schools. So food service, custodians, those sort of positions that aren't part of instruction, their function starts with a 6. For district level expenses, such as finance, our function, it starts with a 7. And then community spending, their function starts with a 9. So you'll get a report here pretty soon in the next couple weeks about our expenses for the 2 hurricanes that we had come through the area. All of those expenses get coded to community services because that was the function of those services. So I think this third lowest in the state could be a little misleading because the default, there's a book that's called the Red Book. If you want to look that up, it lays out how charts of accounts are established between school districts. So it's easy to compare costs between one district and the other because they're all classifying the expenses in the same lines. So the default on most positions and expenses are going to be 5,100. The default is that we're going to use this towards instruction. But depending on how accurate we and the other districts are, that can be misleading. So, but I like to advertise it because the perception that I get in schools and in the community is that the district office is bloated or top-heavy. In reality, we make up a very small percentage of the cost, and I think we struggle giving the proper amount of support to our schools since we spend so low on administrative costs. We're the second largest employer in the county. Since the beginning of time, up until a couple of years ago, we were the largest. Publix has now overtaken us. And we have about 13,500 full-time employees. That does not include subs, does not include athletic coaches. If we were to include those folks, we'd be closer to 15,000. So when we adopt our budget and 80% of it goes to salaries and benefits, that's a direct contribution to our local economy, because that's where folks are deriving their spending money from, is from their salary. We've been very fortunate over the years not to have layoffs. I can't remember the last time we had a true layoff. Seems like we had some psychologists or something along those lines a handful of years ago. And when we presented the board, we were told, no, you got to find a place for those psychologists. So the school board, I think, recognizes the influence they have over in a community. So there's a lot of thought put into, do we lay off or do we reallocate those positions to maybe an area that serves the county better? Questions?
Mr. Nolte? Thank you and your team so much for making this 101. I appreciate that. And Superintendent Hyde, thank you, because you answered about 4 or 5 of the questions a few minutes back. Me being a school teacher, I know how hard everybody works, and I mean, everybody, people that work in the lunchroom and maintenance, everybody. I'm curious, if we were to give everybody in Polk County employees a 1% pay raise, what's it cost us? How many million?
That would cost us, I believe, between $8 and $9 million.
8 and 9 million for 1%.
For 1%. Recurring, and that, that's would be recurring every year.
Because I know that we definitely, as we all know, we've got to do something for those teachers, because when they're making the same amount of money as a first-year teacher, they're really looking around, and there's so many jobs available now that anything we can do will help. And I really think that Tallahassee's going to put that on a top burner, try to get some extra money for the people in the middle of the pack. But thank you, you and your team doing a great job, and appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the compliment.
Ms. Fields?
I think it's important for everyone to understand the process. And Superintendent Hyde, you talked about how we got directions from Tallahassee as it relates to the beginning teachers' wages. And I know that we lobbied. I know that Wendy Dodge did an amazing job with the board's direction and you to see if we could utilize some of those dollars so that we wouldn't have the issue that we have at hand. So I think that it's important for us to understand we can only do so much as board members. And when we were out campaigning, a lot of us were accused of not wanting to do what was best for our teachers that were not getting raises. And we know that. And, we can say a lot of things that we're going to do, but we can only do so much. And so we just need to continue to do what we're doing. We've got a plan. And you've already said that you're addressing that. And you're going to come back, I'm sure, when it's appropriate for recommendations. And hopefully when you come, we'll be able to have the resources in place, and we'll be able to give our employees what they deserve. And really, they're going to deserve more than what we can give. But we can only do so much. So I think that's very important for all of us as board members to understand. And the the statements that we've heard for years is that we are top-heavy here at the district office, which is not true. And so you are bringing it today to verify that, and I think we have to continue to tell the story. We are not top-heavy. You have it here. And so it's up to us to make sure that when we're having conversations about budgeting and funding and stuff, that no, we are not paying astronomical amounts of money to the district office staff. We are trying to put as much money as we can into the classroom and to make sure that we keep our teachers and our other support staff as whole as we can. So I think what you're presenting today, you said it is elementary. Yes, elementary. But I think that it's something that we need to be reminded of often so that we, as board members, understand and can go out and tell the story.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm glad this came up. Just last week in the Ledger, you probably read about $300,000 that we paid to an ex-employee. So when those things are in the newspaper, that really amplifies the feeling that we waste money. There's not a day that goes by that Ms. Jenkins and I have a conversation about how do we increase salaries for our staff. You know, the unions, we're right alongside the unions there, but if the unions were to go away, that focus on salary and benefits would not, it would continue. I always felt like I could retire the day the teachers are paid what they deserve to be paid. In my mind, I thought that would be, you know, a career accomplishment. But I realize I will probably never get to retire as we struggle to really place that importance on our teachers in the state budget. Couple things, since we're on this topic, that the school board has done to try to retain employees. Recently, we changed our payout of sick time. There's a sliding scale, 0 to 3 years. You come to work and you leave within 3 years. 35% of your sick hours are paid out to you. And that there's a scale that goes all the way up to 13 years. Once you hit 13 years and you leave the district, you get paid out 100% of your sick time, 100% of your vacation if you're a position that earns vacation. 10-month positions don't earn vacation because their vacation is during the summer, but 11 and 12-month folks earn vacation. And that's one of our strategies in trying to recruit and retain staff. Because we're kind of deferring those expenses. We're kicking the can down the road for when that employee leaves. But we have a very active sick bank, and we always have folks that are willing to step up and donate sick hours to another employee because they're lacking those sick hours. Up until the last recession, 2011, 2012, district 12-month employees had to use vacation for the various breaks. For instance, Thanksgiving, Thursday and Friday are considered holidays. But me and the finance department, I'd have to use vacation for that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to be able to stay at home and not come in the office. We went through at least 3 consecutive years in the 2010s where we were not able to give pay increases. And to make up for that, the board gave those breaks to all employees. So that right there is 4 weeks that a school board employee, a 12-month employee, gets right off the bat, starting from day one. And the count starts on day one. I think most employees can tell you when is the next holiday and when's the next break. And they're planning to leave at 3:30 in the afternoon on that Friday before because the superintendent always grants that early release day before a break so we can beat traffic coming out of Bartow. But that means a lot, and especially for parents of children to be out and away from your job when your kids are at home is something that is, you can't match it really in any other industry other than education. Health insurance, we continue to have zero premium, monthly premium costs for our employees. Now deductibles and co-insurance, that sort of thing has been increasing. The cost hasn't been increasing, and the board, you guys, have picked up that bill and not passing that along to employees. However, the same pot of money that we divert funds into the health insurance fund are funds that we could use for raises. So whether the employee realizes it or not, they are forgoing pay raises to support health insurance. So in that respect, it is on the backs of employees because it reduces the amount of funds we have to give in pay increases. And we'll have a couple more workshops just on health insurance so we can talk more about those premiums and the possibility of starting to charge a premium to a monthly premium for employees, because that is best practice. So folks have a little bit of ownership over their health insurance plan. If you look at the age bands in the district, by far, 55 to 65, that the majority of our workforce is in that. And health insurance costs or health expenses start to go up. You know, every year you age, there's another test that you need to go into and, you know, have cancer checked and that sort of thing. So once the baby boomer generation is finally out of our school district, we hope to start seeing some efficiencies in our health insurance fund.
Mr. Pitts, I'm going to interject here for a moment. We've had an amazing presentation thus far this morning, and quite honestly, I'm more appreciative than you know of your approach to the presentation today, because, you know, even for existing board members, and I appreciate the approach for new board members, but our community gets lost in school finance far more often than we might like to acknowledge. We use a lot of acronyms. It's not a simplistic, formulaic approach. It's a very complex formula, very complex process, so I'm deeply appreciative of the questions and the conversations we've had today. The problem is we're getting close to time. So what I'd like to do, I've heard a request from Ms. Miller for an additional specific workshop on virtual school and its overall impact, not just financially, but I think we need to talk about the academics of it as well. But I'd like to see if you can't find a place in your presentation where you feel it would be a good place for us to stop and then pick this back up at a subsequent workshop. Because these are important topics, and I want to give them the respect of the time, and knowing again that these are taped and that our stakeholders can get them, we'll be able to put out messaging to our families and say, hey, listen, you know, here's school finance. I mean, I mean no disrespect, and nor do I intend to diminish them by saying this, but here's school finance 101. Here, because we're going to have to relay this information to our stakeholders, just like the efficiency audit is. I mean, it's rather incredible to see how we do stack and rate next to our role-alike peer groups. And they do have some unique advantages. I had somebody recently tell me, you know, one of the disadvantages for Polk is we're not a coastal city. And as a result, we lose out on some tourism dollars and some other things, you know, and okay, so we acknowledge that. But it still means we have to provide, at the end of the day, that doesn't create an excuse for us not to be able to provide services to our students. And so as you opened today, you know, I appreciated the way you did by telling the board and sharing with our community. Our priority is to find dollars to put in front of students. It's not to create a savings account. It's not to increase just salaries alone. We do have to pay a respectful living wage to all of our employees. That is an absolute requirement and a must that we have. But at the end of the day, the reason we look for efficiencies and the reason we look to be cost effective in everything that we do is because those dollars belong in front of students to serve them in real time. Again, not to sit on a shelf for a pet project or those types of things. How do we best provide supports to our students and staff so we can get better outcomes? So I'll turn it back over to you, but I just respectfully, we're getting close to noon, and we had posted that this topic would only go till noon. So if you don't mind finding a place where you feel comfortable, and you can go a few more minutes. I mean, you don't have to stop right at noon. but let me know or let the board know when you think you've reached that point.
No, I appreciate that. And I've just got a couple more slides we'll go through, and then we'll call it a day. You've got the booklets that I handed out, if you want to read through it. And
And the board will receive an updated electronic version as well, because I've had that request from several of you.
the trend for number of teachers, or
For salaries?
it is not, it's not in this presentation, but I can put my hands on that very.
We can do base salary over the last 15 years or,
And we actually, when we budget for positions at the school level, we budget off of an equivalency, which is basically the average salary. You know, in a grant, or maybe here in district departments, we budget down to the dollar for personnel. But Polk did not want schools to make hiring decisions based on a tenured teacher versus a first-year teacher. When charter schools started to proliferate here locally, we started to notice that the teachers they hired were between 0 and 3 years into the profession. They didn't hire, you know, folks in their 50s that have already spent a career teaching just because of the cost. Now charter schools are having a hard time keeping up salaries because they've kind of lost that advantage there. In front of you is just the breakdown of schools, the number of schools that we have in each category. High school, you see 17. I don't count Lake Wales High School because they're not a district-operated school, so that's the difference between that high school being 16 or 17. 3 career centers. Alternative ed, we have 5 different programs there, and it's not Girls Inc. I can't think off the top of my head in a couple of those programs. Adult schools, we dropped down to 1. You know, we closed the Auburndale area adult school. And we currently have 33 charter schools.
it was relocated.
Relocated.
Correct. We
Yeah.
still have the 2 sites. And then in the Auburndale site, still to a certain extent, still provides services to the Auburndale community residents. Sorry.
No, I'm glad you pointed that out. Now, what's interesting about charter schools, there's 2 types of charter schools. Well, there's actually 3 types. There is a conversion school. That's what you saw happening a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s. And for a school to convert to a charter school, I believe that over 50% of the staff have to vote for that move. And I believe 50% of parents whose children go to that school vote. And if those 2 things occur, then the school converts from a district-operated to a charter-operated school. Now, Lake Wales is very unique because not only do they have several conversion and a couple startup charters, they are their own LEA, local education agency. So the difference between that and, let's say, a school like Mia Escuela, it's one of our newer charter schools, is that the funds that the district holds back for administration fees is watered down because of that LEA status. They get their federal funds directly. Their federal funds don't, like IDA, title, food service, those type of federal funds do not flow through the district. The only thing that flows through the district is state funds that go to charter schools. And the state has changed the calendar and made the calendar really a year-round calendar. Typically this time of the year, February, March, we would see the folks turning in their applications for a charter school, and then the district sends out a charter review team to analyze their proposal, and then Candy Amato brings that back to a school board meeting. on a recommendation of whether we want to move forward with this or that charter school. And that calendar now is 365 days. They can submit an application 365 days a year, and I believe we have 60 days to return a recommendation either to go forward or not. So those are all those add up, those are the 135 schools that you see on this slide. I'm going to stop there. Ms. Winchester, next time, put me right before lunch again. Okay.
I have Dr. Allen.
Great. I really appreciate the time that we've taken on this, Superintendent. Really appreciate the data. You know, as we look at some of these analysis and statistics and so forth, you know, I would love to have some information. I know we look at comparative to 67 districts. I know that we, as a board, have talked about let's be comparing ourselves to the top 10 as well. And you know, in our Bible, I noted that, you know, we went from 59th to 61st, and I think in this current budget Bible, it noted that we were 55th as far as district rank out of the 67. But I dug deeper and was looking at comparing between the 10 largest districts, and just within this budget fiscal year that we're in, we were probably the 4th largest as far as percentage of increase per student, right? Out of the top 10, we were number 4. Now, however, out of the top 10 school districts, we were the lowest as far as per student funding. I don't know, I would love to see, as you know, as we're doing that analysis, to really do some comparisons and a dive around that. And I don't know if that's true. That was just my quick analysis on that. I don't know if you want to speak to that in some way, but
I'd love for us to get together and look at that. The document that I gave you that breaks down the calculations has the funding in all the different categories. And so you can compare yourself however you want with that data. Unfortunately, they don't provide it in spreadsheets, so it has to be manually manipulated to try to compare other districts with ourselves. But that is like I said, coming from a background that was driven in metrics. Metrics are what I tend to look for to show how well we're doing something or we're not. So that efficiency committee, I'm very excited that we're going through that process. So we have an outside organization that will essentially rank us on how efficient we are with our funds. That way, if we decide that we want to go to the voters in a couple of years with another tax referendum, we have some data to show our community members how well we've managed those funds and how we stack up against other districts. So I'll give you a call. We'll do it over lunch. All right. That's why you do it in government.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk calendar for a minute before everybody leaves. So we have 2 work sessions that we don't have a school board member immediately following before the end of the school year. That would be, and you know, Wendy sent it to me, and then I pulled up my calendar. That would be on February 14th and April 11th. I'd like to propose that we make those extended work sessions as we had in the fall. To continue this conversation, I also, I know staffing was originally mentioned in this, but I'd love to get a little bit deeper dive on staffing, preferably in February, as we're kind of in the middle of staffing allocations for schools and things like that. And it sounds like other topics will likely come up before the April meeting as well. So I would just ask that board members, if you're available, that we can hold it. So I believe last time we held until, I think we originally held until 4, and then that ended up being 2. So we can probably just hold until 2.
I would say 2.
Is that?
We can provide lunch.
And I very much appreciate the opportunity to lay the groundwork. Typically, we start laying the groundwork in the same meeting that we're going to ask for additional budget. So it's nice to spend time on all these questions.
And I'll work with Mr. Pitts because I think we have other workshops in between where if they're not too topic heavy, there may be an opportunity for us to adjust smaller topics within budgeting. I know he had put a lot of effort in with Ms. Jenkins, with Heather, to make sure that we addressed the reality of the millage rate and how that has, over the last 10 years, adversely affected our overall revenue stream. So there's smaller topics like that I think, while many of you know this, it's important for us, again, to keep reminding the community that this is our reality. That while we're building at an incredible rate, we're increasing property revenue and sales tax revenue, we see a diminishing return on that money as our millage rate and other factors get calculated downward to adjust for that increase, to counter that increase. So there's an opportunity for us to have those conversations. So we'll create a schedule. I'll work with Mr. Pitts and Heather, Ms. Jenkins, to create that schedule and get it to you for a calendar. But again, we won't keep you past 2. We'll be respectful of your time on those 2 dates. Thank you.
Thank you. It was February 14th and April 11th.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's, yes. I believe Yvette has already extended the one on the 14th on our calendars,
That's exciting.
and she's working on.
Have it on Valentine's Day.
Mr. Pitts, all I'm going to tell you is you better come bearing gifts.
Sweet kisses. That's
Madam Chair, that formally concludes the workshop, with the exception of any questions that you may have. Oh, sorry, Ms. Fields was next. I apologize.
Sure that
Justin, I'll get to you.
we have a benefits page as well, Mr. Pitts, because I think that everyone needs to understand that the benefits is a part of the salaries. And everyone needs to understand that those are some added things. And as you said earlier, if we didn't do those benefits, then we probably could pay people more than what they're being paid. But I think that's something that we should be constantly telling the story about the added benefits that we provide. And the health insurance piece, you're very correct about that. That's going to really have to be some serious discussions coming up very, very soon on that.
We'll add that to Valentine's Day schedule.
Valentine's Day? Okay, maybe April. Thank you.
Mr. Sharpless.
One of the most concerning things for me when I look at not just this presentation, but school finance in general, is where we rank in our district cost differential. It's something that's really alarming to me. And so I would like to also include Wendy Dodge in these kind of discussions on when we go to I plan on visiting with legislators during session, as I'm sure other school board members are, what are effective ways and really leveraging our relationships with other school districts, maybe some school districts that their differential cost, their DCD is also low, and how we can potentially advocate for an increase in that for us. I mean, like was mentioned earlier, we don't have coastal properties. We have all the issues of a large district when it comes to transportation costs, which I know is later on in your presentation, right? But we don't have the advantages of some of those large districts, large affluent areas, coastal property taxes, things like that. So I would like to also bring Wendy Dodge in on this a little bit, or maybe not even necessarily on the work session, but maybe just when we go to Tallahassee to talk about strategies for that. I think that would be beneficial.
I agree, and I'll work with Ms. Dodge on getting information.
Thank you.
And just to follow up on that too, Justin, I would call Wendy about that, because I know when we looked at it a couple of years ago, the analysis was that doing a study may not benefit Polk. It may actually make it worse. So, but she has some data on that. But she, I believe, will be in Tallahassee for the next several board meetings. So Tallahassee would be a great place to talk to her.
Thank you.
Seeing no further business to come before the board, we are adjourned.